delighted this evening to welcome Denise Welch.
Hello. I love these bits of your show where where you and the person just sit looking around thinking, am I live or has Linda worked this out yet? Oh my God, hilarious.
we don't talk about that, Denise. So, you know, it's obviously it's not my forte, but I'm doing my best. We set this.
No, you are.
For COVID. Here's something I bought earlier.
Would that be the #1 book on Amazon, Linda Riley?
Yes, it would be. So this is the congratulations. This is the Unwelcome Visitor.
Thank you.
Actually, just came out today.
It came out today, and it went to #1 about an hour ago on Amazon. So I'm overwhelmed and overjoyed, and I'm thrilled to be, you know, getting another amazing platform to talk about my story.
Yeah, can you tell the people watching a little bit about the book? We'll go more into it, and also why you felt it was important to write this book.
Yeah. Well, my story started 31 years ago. Don't panic, I won't go through it year by year, but it was started when I gave birth to my eldest son, Matthew, who's now 31. And so my journey with clinical depression started as postnatal depression. And although many women who get postnatal depression go on to make a complete recovery, and I think it's important for me to say that in case anybody's, you know, having a baby or just had a baby, then most people make a complete recovery. Unfortunately, some don't, and I was one of those. So I have lived with this condition for many, many, many years. And my depression tends to be in the main endogenous. So there's endogenous and reactive depression. Reactive is pretty much what it says on the tin. Your depression comes about as a result of a feeling, thoughts, or a set of circumstances. Endogenous depression is when you have zero control over when it comes. So what spawned this book was last September, which was my last, touch wood, episode of depression. And I was driving up to the northeast with my friend Lisa and her 2 children, who are Matty's goddaughters, driving up for a fantastic weekend with my sister, who I think you've met, Linda, who has 3 foster children. And we were in the car listening to music, singing along, and I got to the Angel of the North, and I got a tingling in my palms and a metallic taste in my mouth, which is over 30 years, which is often what has heralded the appearance of the unwelcome visitor, which is how I refer to my depression. And by the time I got to my sister's, the depression was overwhelming me. The next morning, after very little sleep, I got up, even though I didn't want to, but I felt I had to because I promised to go out with Debbie and the kids. And I'm very used to hiding it, but something impulsive happened, and I picked up my phone and I decided to chronicle a depressive episode in real time. I think that with social media, which has a great role to play in many occasions, I always have my followers and, you know, fans or whatever, people who I give a voice to share in my celebrations and my joys and the up things in my life. So I think it's only fair to share the low points in my life, because we live in a compare and despair world where everybody's living to aspire to these ridiculous, unachievable, pretendy lifestyles that people have. And I think it's important as a mental health advocate to show that there's another side to someone who is described often as a bubbly personality, which is part of my personality, but the darkness is another side. So because I've talked so openly about my illness for 30 years, I was kind of overwhelmed and a little blindsided by the viral response to my videos, which I wasn't aware of at the time. Today, I was a guest on Loose Women, and they did a montage of clips, and they showed a bit of those episodes, and then they showed Mary Nightingale talking about me on News at 10. I had no idea I'd been on News at 10 until today. But very long story short, Hodder and Stoughton publishers came to me and asked me if I would pretty much do what I said in a video in a book. And I didn't jump at the chance at first, because I knew it meant revisiting many dark places in my life that I didn't necessarily want to return to. But I felt that I had a voice that was important for those people who don't have one. And so I made the decision to write the book and started in September, and it came out today. And I've had some amazing publicity. I've had some heartbreaking but heartwarming messages from people who heard me talking, and some who have read the book or listened to it on audio. And I've spent a lot of the day in tears, but it's gone to #1. And if this book is my legacy, I will die happy, because it's something that I'm very proud of, and I feel it's the book I needed when I was first poorly.
Yeah, no, it is. That's something I was going to talk about, because it's quite a taboo subject, isn't it? Talking about mental health. Are you finding that, or do you find?
It still is, sadly, Linda, not anything like it was 30 years ago. I mean, as someone who has lived with this illness and talked about it, you know, I was a lone voice 30 years ago when I was speaking out about this. And one of the reasons I decided to do that, against certainly career advice, which was, you know, from my then agent, a guy called Denises, who was about 110, but he sort of said, you know, oh, darling, you don't want to be talking about that. People will think that you're mad. They'll put you away. You'll never work. And I remember thinking, do you know something? If something as horrendous and isolating and crippling and debilitating as this can happen to someone who was this happy-go-lucky, joyous person in pregnancy, having a much-wanted child with a man that she loved, and, you know, in a lovely place, had a lovely place to live, some money in the bank, all of those things. But depression doesn't care who it hits. So I made a decision early on, because there was no help for me. And had I not had the family that I do, who for never one day thought that this was anything other than a serious illness, I can honestly say I don't know where I would be today, or if I would indeed be here. And that may sound like a very dramatic statement, but it's very true. So the subject is, there is still a stigma around it. And my mission in life is to find a parity between how we deal with physical illness and how we deal with mental illness. Nobody, if somebody had something as serious as cancer, nobody would go up to that person and say, well, you've had that a month now and you look fine. So I think you should get yourself up, put a pair of trainers on and go out for a bloody good jog. Nobody would say that, Linda. So not only do we have this potentially terminal illness sometimes, we have to continually prove that we have it. And it's not fair, because it's, and the other thing I think that's been a release to people to hear me talking about it is that they said, oh my God, I can now say to my mum, my dad, my brother, my husband, my wife, they always say when I have an episode, what do you think brought it on? And sometimes nothing brought it on. The chemical imbalance that causes clinical depression brought it on. Just like whatever happens when you have diabetes or when you have cancer or when these other horrendous conditions happen. It's out of your control much of the time. And I feel that I give it a voice. There are wonderful people like Stephen Fry and Ruby Wax who have made incredible inroads into explaining mental illness. But there are sometimes with people who are Oxbridge educated that some of my audience may not look to them because they would think that they talk in a different language. And so I tend to talk in a language that I understand and I relate to. And that seems to have been the case with people today.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. One thing that really stands out for me is the title of the book, because it actually does give hope in that title. It says, as you just said, you know, you talk in a language that people really relate to, and the unwelcome visitor really sums it up, doesn't it? And it gives hope that it's going to go away.
Well, I say about this book that it is a book about depression, and the subtitle is Depression and How I Survive It. It's not depression and how to survive it, because I have no medical knowledge whatsoever. So I would never try to tell someone how to survive it. It's how I survive it. And if they get solace from that, then feeling that they're not, you know, then they're not alone. The unwelcome visitor is how I refer to it, because I've always seen it as almost a separate entity. And I've always spoken to it as a separate entity. I have stood before going live on stage, before going onto a set with a live audience, I've stood there saying, don't you dare come, and because I have got to do this with or without you. And I've always spoken to it like that. But the point about this book is that the unwelcome visitor will come, and I've got used to the fact that I will have visits from him. I know I give him a gender, and I think that's maybe a historical thing of just like scary monsters and scary men historically. So I apologize if I upset men by that, but I've just always referred to it as a him. But the unwelcome visitor will always leave. And that's where I want this book to be hopeful. And I say in it, you've read it, if I had all the world's piles of problems in my front room, I would still choose my pile, because I've learned how to really thoroughly love and enjoy the periods between my episodes of mental illness. And we can survive this by talking about it and by reaching out.
I'm going to ask some questions that are coming in. Michelle Partington is saying hi. She's very proud of your #1 placement.
Michelle, hello. She's working on her own book. Hi, Michelle.
She's also saying, which I wanted to say, very nice placement. Now, if you could move your head over slightly, there are 2 awards there. Could you tell me about 2 DIVA?
I can indeed. The one on my left, Awesome Ally of the Year 2019, was won by my eldest son, Matty, who I've mentioned because it was when I had Matty that this story first started. And he won Ally of the Year in 2019. And in 2017, Ally of the Year DIVA Awards won by yours truly. I am, as you know, Linda, an incredibly proud ally of the LGBT community, and very honoured to have been welcomed in so fervently and passionately by the lesbian community, very much so. Head lesbian being your good self and leader of the lesbians of the world. And I think that Matthew's passion for this community and love for the community has, if I'm going to take any credit, I will take credit for that. And so I was extremely proud. If you remember, he was on tour. He couldn't come and collect it himself, so I got up and made a speech on his behalf, and it was an incredibly emotional night. But it was lovely that Lincoln and Lewis were there, my stepson and my husband. So yeah, I'm very proud of Matthew, of both my children, you know, but both my kids really have a really sensitive soul, and Matthew really uses his voice to speak out for those people who are underrepresented and oppressed. And in fact, of course, there was the famous Dubai incident, remember last year, when he really put his neck on the line, and it could have been a potentially very serious incident, but he was very passionate about the oppression of the gay community in Dubai, and jumped off stage and kissed a young boy who asked him to. And he was nearly arrested, and oh my God, that was a heck of a night when I got a phone call from Dubai saying, you know, I might be going to jail. Anyway, he didn't, it was sorted, and whether or not he'll ever return there, I don't know, but it showed his commitment for the community.
Yeah, you must be very proud. I mean, as I see it, you know, when children are brought up in an environment that's not homophobic, these are the kind of results that you see. So just want to say.
Well, I think it was interesting for my kids because we are from a very liberal, and I include my mum and dad in as well. I think that they grew up not understanding what homophobia could be. Do you know what I mean? I suppose. And I think because since the 70s, I've been at drama school, and then, you know, was a young actress by the time it's sort of 1980, that in my profession, being gay was accepted. It was a great profession to be, you know, a classless profession, one where gays were welcomed with open arms and in fact encouraged. You know, I never got to kiss one straight guy in any bloody play I did at drama school, for God's sake. You know, all of my year were gay. And so that's the way that my children were brought up. But a lot of people who were brought up that way wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to use their voice, but luckily mine do.
Yeah, so I'm going to go on to your other son now. I hope I'm not giving away any big secrets, but you actually, I think it was you that coined a phrase called the triple L. And if you want to explain what that is to people that don't know.
Well, Triple L is late life lesbian. And this is not a coming out speech. I did have my moments back in the day, as you well know. Fleeting moments. People were lucky to get away. But we've been working on a project that our friend, well, our mutual friend, isn't it, Jackie Lawrence, wrote a book which spawned a web series called Different for Girls. And in it, I had my first on-screen lesbian kiss. My friend Rose, who's my best friend to this day, gets very upset when I say that, because I did a play at drama school called Deuce of Fish, Stas and Vi, and she was my first, you know, theatrical kiss, but I tell her that was on stage and this was on the telly. As a result of that, my character Maeve, Jackie wrote a spin-off called Maud and Maeve, which now may be called Triple L. So we're working on that, and we're hoping to go into production in 2021. It's interesting because when Suran Jones, I know another ally of the community, played Gentleman Jack, there was a lot of dissension in the ranks about the fact that should it have been played by a lesbian actress. But Suran was stood very strong and said, you know, the fact that I was a straight woman playing a gay character, but look at the crew. There was a complete diverse crew of many, many, many gay people on the crew. So it doesn't necessarily matter who's in front of the camera, as long as the community is represented elsewhere. So I hope that people would think that the reason I was playing this late life lesbian is because obviously I was the only actress in the entire universe of the world that could possibly play that role. I'm doing this. I wish I had one of those theatrical fans, but I've only got my little fan here, as the actress said.
And I heard a little rumour that your son is going to come out in the show as well. Is that right?
My son? Well, he's not coming out in real life. Let me tell you, that's for nothing. He's yeah. I know which side his bread's buttered on, as they say, or do they say that? I don't know. But he likes the girls. But we did a pilot, and Louis played my son in the pilot, who also is gay in it. And I mean, the thing with Louis is he's 19 and he wants to carve his own way in the industry. He doesn't want to always be working with mum. The problem is, if I'm doing a project and I get the chance to recommend a young actor, my first choice is always Louis, because he is so darn good. And this is what, you know, I think that although my mental health has in the main been very good through lockdown, my heart is breaking for my theatre community, because I'm seeing people every day losing their, you know, it's not just people losing their jobs, there's people losing their careers. There's young people, you know, my agent is dealing with people, a massive tsunami of mental health issues with her own clients, because they just see their future evaporating in front of them. You know, Judi Dench did a really passionate speech today where she said she doesn't know if she's going to see theatre come back before she pops her clogs, you know. And we need theatre and we need culture. And to say that our theatres can come back but we can't do live shows in them, I just think I'm going to have to do a musical in Primark, because it seems that you can sing and dance in there. You know, don't even get me started on all that bollocks. Anyway.
So Nat Reed is asking, she herself and her partner Sally met you at Elfest 2017. She says congratulations on the book. It's arriving for her tomorrow. You will help so many in the future and have done so over the years. And she wants to know, will you be doing a book signing after COVID lockdown is over?
Well, we're talking about that now. Are you having your book festival, Linda?
We will be, but not this year. Definitely not
this year. Yes, I will be doing it of sorts. I've also signed what felt like 1 million books, but it wasn't that. It obviously wasn't that many. So we do have a whole batch of signed copies, and we're going to be running some competitions and opportunities to win. But I will let you all know if I am going to be doing an actual book signing. The thing about these book signings is that I've done them before when I've had books, and it's so funny because when my first autobiography in 2011 went to #1, which was much more of a sex, drugs and rock and roll book, I have to say this isn't. And that was me taking the power back from the press, because it's like my life had been out there, but I was determined that if my life was going to be out there, I was going to be the person that controlled that narrative, not the press. So you go to some areas, like I go to Ireland, to Eastern Books in Ireland, and the queue's around the corner, and it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And yet you go to a place where you know your book is sold, and there's like 3 men and a dog there, and you think, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. And yet you go to somewhere else and there's a big queue. So I would definitely make sure that I rang you all first so that you could rally all your friends, so I wouldn't have egg on my face.
We'll definitely be there. Emma Miller McCaffrey is saying one thing and then asking another. So
Right.
Got my glasses on here. She says, you are an inspirational role model. Who would you say is your inspirational role model?
Oh, wow. Well, I think that my inspirational role model was my mum. I lost my mum 8 years ago, and my biggest regret is that people say you shouldn't have regrets. I have many, and I'm not embarrassed about having them. My biggest regret is that I didn't turn my life around when my mum was still alive, and I would have given anything for my mum, Annie, to have seen this part of my life, because she worried so much about me. I'm not religious, but I can only take some solace in the fact that she lived for 3 weeks after I'd given up drinking. And so I feel that she died knowing that I was making an effort to turn things around, because she'd, you know, when you are an alcoholic and you are self-medicating, your drinking doesn't just ruin your life, it really impacts on the lives of people who love you. So she was a great role model to me and a great strength to me, and I miss her, and I miss her every day.
This might be a good one to move on to Michelle Partington. She's actually asking, how's your papa?
Do you fancy my dad, Michelle? Because you know he's single. My dad has been, well, you know my dad, Linda. My dad has been fantastic in lockdown. Honestly, he really, really has. He lives in the northeast, I'm in the northwest. So my sister's up there. So they have been able to go and socially distance with him and, you know, have a bottle of wine outside and everything. But, you know, he's obviously lived on his own since Mum died. And he cared for her for quite some time. So he is used to living on his own, but he's so gregarious. You know, you just have to look at Facebook to see him surrounded by blooming women everywhere. It's like, Dad, do you know any men whatsoever? So Dad's lockdown will not end until the pubs are open. He's got no interest in going golfing because the clubhouse is not open. But I saw today on Facebook 2 really attractive women, Von and Leslie St. John. And there they are, sat outside having cake and tea with Dad. He's already I posted a video of him dressed up as Dolly Parton dancing around to Jolene on the garden, because my dad's always done a drag act. Sadly, Raquel, as he is known, doesn't cut quite the dash that she used to back in the day, but he still saw lockdown as an opportunity to cheer up his many fans, and, you know, phones me on a daily basis when I've tweeted or Instagrammed something going, how many hits have I had today on Instagram? So he's, I've been very proud of how he's dealt with it, because I think older people have had a really bad rap with this. And they've been very frightened and very, you know, very, very lonely. And my heart goes out to those people who have had mums and dads in hospital who haven't been, you know, I have friends now whose parents are in hospital poorly with other things, and they're not able to go and see them. And it's quite, it's very, very distressing. It's been a really tough time.
Somebody, Elizabeth Jennings is asking, have you had people, because she has, you know, telling you that you're selfish for focusing on your depression? It's a comment that was made to her, and she wanted
oh, really?
to come across it. Yeah.
Well, if you know, there's always going to be people out there. Who's that? Who said that? What's the name of the lady?
Elizabeth Jennings.
Elizabeth. Do you know something, Elizabeth? If people say that you're selfish by concentrating, by talking about your depression, then I don't know who these people are. But, you know, if they're people that you can remove from your life, or at least take some time away from, then I would do something. I feel it's very unselfish to talk about depression because it helps other people. And also, we are told all the time it's good to talk. would they be saying, you've got to ask yourself, Elizabeth, would they be saying it to you if you had another condition? Or is it just because it's an invisible illness that they can't see? I don't think you're being selfish at all. And if those people don't want to listen to you, there are plenty of other people who will. Back in the day when I first had it, we didn't have Google, we didn't have the internet. I didn't have any access to any information whatsoever. I thought I was the only person who'd been hospitalized with depression. I thought I'd gone mad. And it was only because my mum said to me every day, you haven't gone mad. People who are mad don't think they're mad, and you will get better. I needed to hear that I had a childlike need for my mother in those days. And so I really empathize with anyone who hasn't. But these days, at the click of a button, even if you can't access mental health services because they're always overwhelmed, they're particularly going to be now. But at the click of a button on Help for Depression, you will find some group or some person or some community that will help you bridge the gap before you can seek professional help. I promise you.
There you go, Elizabeth. That's a lovely answer. Thank you, Denise. There's a bit in the book, your #1 best-selling book, that I wanted to ask you about, because I'll just say that. I'll see how many times I can say it. I'm so pleased for you. I'm not surprised, but I'm so glad it happened just before our show. There was a bit in the book that really struck a chord with me, and it was when you were set up by a journalist. You didn't know she was a journalist. Was it Myra, the fake?
Myra Mahmood.
Yeah,
she was the cousin. She was the cousin of Mazia Mahmood, the fake sheikh. And it was a pretty horrendous time, Linda. I've always said with anything like self-medication, I never try to excuse any behaviors, but there are often reasons for behaviors. And the reason that I went down a very destructive path of drink and drugs was because of my depression. And anybody who has had severe clinical depression will know that sometimes you will do anything to stop the pain. We all know what the ultimate of that is. And hopefully, people will get help before that horrendous time happens. But I know what it feels like to want to do anything to stop the pain. I tried to throw myself out of a moving car. Now that today has been heralded as Denise tried to take her own life. It wasn't that. It wasn't a fast-moving car, but it was a desire to hurt myself physically, to take away the pain in my head. It was an impulsive decision to do. And that was just before I saw a GP who said, well, I had 5 children, dear, and I just didn't have time to get depressed. So it was, what was the original question, Linda? Because I've gone off tangent.
Well, the original question was that this woman basically...
it's Maya. So basically what happened was, I didn't know at the time, but I was being hacked by a tabloid newspaper group. None of us knew we were being hacked. So there was a paranoia created in you where everything I did seemed to come out there. I didn't trust anybody. And what happened was, 9/11 happened. Louis was a tiny baby. And I was filming a series called The Vice, where I was playing the guest lead in this episode of The Vice with Peter Firth. And I was in a really bad way. And I was working with the wonderful actor Ken Stott. And 9/11 happened and we had to continue filming. And I can't tell you, loads of people had to continue working, but it was this surreal, horrible time. Anyway, my friends didn't want me to be on my own. And so they asked me to go into London, and I was in this kind of fog. And I went into the toilet and I met this girl, and she was a really beautiful girl. And she recognized me and she sort of flattered me and said I was a favorite actress, and me being me, I had a few scoops and took her under my wing, and she told me that she was this poor little rich girl and Daddy was buying her a flat next to the Sanderson Hotel, but she didn't really have any friends, and I kind of felt sorry for her, really, because I thought she's a typical example of someone who seems to have everything but has nothing. And I liked her. And I gave her my phone number and said, stay in touch. I introduced her to my friends. I was with all my gay friends, Lester and Stephen and everybody. And I would say for the next 3 weeks, she rang me every day. Now, Matthew was about 12 and Louis was a baby. And I was in probably 20 of 21 phone calls. The answer was, oh, hi, Myra. I'm just going to be taking Matthew to school. I'm just going to be back in Louis. I'm just going off to film some DIVA. I'm just going off to film this, whatever I was doing at the time. Living a very normal working mum life. And eventually she would ring me and I'd be going, hello, because I'm thinking, oh my God, she's becoming a bit of a stalker now, but I didn't have the heart to say anything. Anyway, fast forward to, I was in Spain 3 weeks later, and I'd been doing a photo shoot with Bev Callard and Gabby Glaister, and they flew home and I stayed, and she called me, and she involved me in a conversation about about a party. And she said to me, do you mind that if any of my friends do a little bit of, you know, that they occasionally do little bits of drugs here and there? And I said, well, what's it to me? You know, I was 43 or something. I've been around the block, you know. And she said, do you ever? And I went, oh. I said, I've done it when I've really been bad with depression before. And I was very honest with her. Anyway, long story short, I am not naive, absolutely. But she was very, very clever. And basically, she was a journalist who had been sent to entrap me. And I flew home the next day. And on the Sunday morning in the Sunday Mirror was the title, My Cocaine Shame. And she had video taped my whole conversation. She had entrapped me into getting in touch with a friend of a friend. It was a horrible, toxic time. And I stupidly did that. But the point being is that for years, I thought that she had just stumbled across this woman who was clearly in a bad way in life and decided to see if there was a story there. What I didn't know is that I'd been targeted. So from that night that she met me in that bar, she had been sent out to entrap me. And by the time I got back to the hotel, the paparazzi men were outside taking pictures, and I never knew how they knew that I was there. And of course, what happened with the hacking is, for many of us, and I'm not going boo-hoo, I know a lot of people don't have sympathy for people on the television, but they put bugs in my hotel room. Not the Mirror Group now, this is way, way back with different people. But they put bugs in my hotel room, Linda, you know, on 2 occasions. And so therefore, I spent years not trusting anybody. I didn't trust my friends. I didn't trust some of my family. And some of those have been very, very difficult to repair. And that's happened. So if you imagine that's happening to little old me, God knows what's happened in the ranks of the royal family and people like that, because that was just little old me, you know. So it was a very horrible time. And I've never ever seen that girl again. And it would be interesting to see if I would recognize her. I'm sure she'd recognize me, and I think I probably would recognize her. What a horrible, horrible person to do that, because she knew that most of the time she called me, I was just somebody struggling through, trying to make a living and bring my children up. There you go.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, exactly what I was thinking, because when I read that part, I really felt pain for you. And what I wondered, you said about for a long time, you found it difficult to trust people. Does incidents like that break your trust, or are you able to trust people again?
Well, I'm a trusting person. I tend to be quite different to Lincoln. So I trust people until they betray my trust. Lincoln doesn't trust anybody until they earn his trust. So we've sort of yin and yanged each other a little bit. So I have got much more savvy. I don't let people in as much. And also, Linda, a lot of that comes with sobriety. You know, I've been 8 years sober now. So I self-edit, and I don't get myself into situations that I used to get myself into. You know, I was a sitting duck really for people to do things like that to me, because I was out of control a lot of the time, and I was easy to take advantage of. But now, of course, I'm in a completely different place. I mean, Lincoln's been trying to socially isolate since 1989. He never wants to come out of it.
I can believe that. Regina Falangi, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. She's asking, what one piece of advice would you give to your teenage self?
Interesting, because the Big Issue asked me a few years ago to write a piece about that, as did Happy Full magazine, a letter to my teenage self. And the key would be that I would be kinder to myself. I think if I was writing a letter to my teenage self, it would be that I can't necessarily stop this path that's going to happen with mental illness, but I would certainly not be afraid of putting myself first. I worked through some crushing depressions and 2 nervous breakdowns, because although I was talking the talk, I wasn't walking the walk. So I was very able to tell other people that they should speak out about mental illness. I couldn't do it myself. And in Coronation Street, I had 2 breakdowns. That's not because of them, that's because I didn't say I was poorly. And it was a pretty horrendous time. So that would be my advice to my younger self, is to put yourself first a bit more and don't be such a people pleaser and be kinder to yourself.
Great bit of advice. Jacqueline Ann Macmillan Yarwood, I don't know why lesbians have to have such long names. Is asking, sorry, Jacqueline. I do actually know Jacqueline, so I do feel bad. Going on from what you were just saying, she's actually asking, do you think workplaces, health services and other places need to have more mental health training?
Yes, absolutely. And that is from the doctors up. I mean, you know, again, 30 years on of dealing with this illness and meeting so many medics and talking to thousands and thousands of men and women over the years. But when I was first poorly, my doctors, well, not the one who said I had 5 children and didn't have time to get depressed, she was gone straight away. But my doctors in the north, when I went back up to the northeast when my mum and dad took me up there, they basically said to me, Denise, if you have any information, you know, I was trying to seek hormone help. They were very much saying, we will do anything we can to help you. We just don't know. It seemed that doctors didn't do mental health or backs. They were the 2 things they didn't do. Now it's much, much more understood. But it's still not completely understood. And I've got a fantastic GP, and there's certain things she'll say is, we don't know. Mental health services have been woefully underfunded, not just by the Tory government, by the Labour government as well. Everybody's always saying they're going to do more for mental health. We have a wonderful shadow minister for mental health in Rosanna Allen Khan, who I've become quite close to. I know you know her, Linda, and I know she's friends with Dawn. She's an amazing woman, and she's doing a lot. She's a great person to have on our team. But there is, as I used the word before, going to be a tsunami of problems, because there were people trying to access mental health services before COVID-19, and now it's overwhelming. And if we're talking about a second wave, the second wave is going to be the NHS on its knees because of that and the undiagnosed cancers, never mind second wave of that. We have to remember that there were people dying of other illnesses before coronavirus, you know, 450 a day from cancer. Smear tests, undiagnosed, you know, 60,000 undiagnosed cancer deaths. Lots and lots of worry about those things that we have to sort of like clear the backlog as much as possible. And yes, and in order to answer the other part of your question, can companies do more? They absolutely can. There's a lot of companies who will very happily say it's good to talk, you know, and then when somebody rings in and says they have a mental illness, they don't want to know about it. Did you know that 99% of people who are off work with a mental health issue don't get a get well card? Years ago, 5 years ago, I did a talk at Roche Pharmaceutical Company in Welland, and they were having a physical health week and a mental health week, and I was bowled over. They asked me to go and talk, and I was bowled over by what they were doing to support their staff's mental health, from the top oncologists down to the cleaners. They were all invited to hear me talk and other people, and there was a queue, like I was a doctor. Lincoln was going, what is going on? They put me in this office afterwards, and there was a queue of people, these top cancer doctors. I'm going, I'm not I'm just Denise from Whitley Bay. But they wanted to talk about it. But what they had done is simple things, but the company had bought them all Headspace, which is the Calm app on their phone. They had a lovely mental health pod downstairs where there was these massage therapists brought in a couple of times a week. There was a lovely sleep pod where if somebody felt a bit overwhelmed, they were allowed to take half an hour during the day just to go and chill, put their Headspace on, and little things like that. as well as the actual physical place, it's the fact that they are working for people who care about how they feel. Because if we don't look after the mental health, we have no workforce, you know, because it's becoming overwhelming.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lynn Davis, who's actually Amanda Salt's mum, is
Amanda's mum?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Lynn.
She's asking, how long did it take you to seek help for yourself?
Well, because I was so poorly, so I had my baby boy, remembering mine started postnatally. I had Matthew on the Saturday morning. I went home on the Wednesday and I felt okay, but I felt a bit spaced out. You know, when you have a kind of an out of body, surreal sort of nothing feels right feeling. But you know, I just had a baby. And so I was expecting to not feel right. I had the baby blues on the Thursday, very emotional, every card that came, woo, you know, but 80% of women have that, and then it gets better. I was put into a full-blown panic attack on the Friday, and on the Saturday, my mum knew I was heading for a fall. It was the day of the Hillsborough disaster, April the 19th, 15th, April the 15th, 1989. And I heard over a radio when we were out for a walk with the baby that this had happened and 96 people had died. By the time we got back to the flat, I said something to my mum, said something about it to me, and I said, no, that was a dream. Why are you trying to make me like I'm going mad? And she thought, oh God. And then within about 20 minutes, I was in a really black, thick depression. So we tried to access help early on by going to this terrible doctor who said those things. And after that, it was real trial and error, Lynn. It was hard because I kept getting sent to psychiatrists who were rubbish. And there are some wonderful people out there, but they were rubbish. And, you know, I maintain to this day, if postnatal depression and menopause happened to men, there'd be one on every bloody street corner. And I hate to generalize like that, but it was definitely true, because the world would have screeched to a halt back then, you know, in a very male-dominated world that we lived in 30 years ago. And I would see a psychiatrist and they would have this kind of face. And they were trying to, they were desperate to pin this depression on a childhood trauma. And I was poorly and almost catatonic and monosyllabic. And I just wanted somebody to make me well. And I kept saying, I had a happy childhood. And it would be like, did you? When your dad would put you in the bath and it's like, oh my God, it was making me ill. And I can understand why people suffer from that false memory syndrome. Honestly, I really can see how people can go down that pretty scary road, because my childhood, you know, was a lovely childhood. And it was nothing to do with that. It was a massive hormonal chaos that started with having a baby. You put a baby grows in your tummy and you push it out your foo-foo, and you tell me that that's not going to cause a hormonal imbalance in some people. But it took me 20 years to have the hormone side looked at. So that was a very long-winded, hopefully not boring, answer to your question, Lynn, that I accessed treatment straight away, but it was a long time before I had good and effective treatment.
What did you say there, Denise? Did you say foo-foo?
Yes.
I'll use that. Great cut-up line. This question is from somebody who's quite interesting. Her name is Linda Riley.
Oh, hi, Linda Riley.
She's asking, you've had such an amazing career. Alfreda St. Pet, Spender, Coronation Street, Waterloo Road, Soldier, as you know, I love. What would you say your favourite part has been to play? Probably none of those that I mentioned.
Yeah, it's not so much, well, I think one of my favourite television parts was Steph in Waterloo Road, which was just such a great part. And the part kind of grew with me, so the writers started to write for her. And, you know, I just love that character. And Waterloo Road is on BBC iPlayer now, and it's great because we've got a completely new audience. So I'm getting sort of lots of Steph-related stuff coming through to me on social media, which is great. I think one of my favourite jobs was the 3 series that I did of Soldier. And I think that was because it was like being sent away with your best friends abroad. The guys they were the ones who had to be in the army fatigues in 90-degree heat. Us girls would flit in our little summer dresses and do a few scenes and stuff. And it was just, you know, we had the best time. And it was a very sexy show and a sexy cast, and there was a great vibe. And, you know, ITV treated us so well that if we weren't filming, if we had more than 5 days off, they would either fly us back to England from Germany, or they'd fly my then husband Tim and Matthew out, who was then 5. It really looked after us very well. So I think from a job point of view, that. But in the theatre, and I was a theatre actress for the first 10 years before I did any television. I think in the theatre, my favourite role was Mary Hoff in Jim Cartwright's The Rise and Fall of Little Voice at the Royal Exchange in 2004. That was just, it was also a comeback role for me, because I was very frightened after a particularly horrible episode of depression on stage. I didn't do theatre for 12 years. So it was kind of a comeback role for me. And I was awarded for Best Actress for that. And it was, you know, awards are always nice, but it was kind of like a grown-up award. And I felt it was a justification for me that I hadn't let the depression define me enough to not go back into theatre. Another favourite role or favourite show was Boy Meets Girl I did, which was the first transgender show that I did about 3 years ago with Rebecca Root, wonderful trans actress who's now gone on to have quite a stellar movie career. Well, you've met Rebecca with me, haven't you, many times? And she played the lead in this series, which was about a guy and a trans girl and their kind of mad family. But the fact that she was trans was just one of the problems in this kind of domestic Geordie family. And so it was a great way of educating people about the trans community within humour. So there was a lot of people like Betty from Bolton who watched it, who would have said, oh, there's a documentary on about them transes, I'm not going to watch that, it's not my cup of tea. Like you get out of ignorance, nothing more. But by it being in a comedy drama, there was several people that got in touch with us and told us that they had come out to their parents as a result of them enjoying watching a sort of funny sitcom that happened to have a trans lead character. So it was quite a breakthrough series with that, BBC Two.
Yeah, it really was, actually. I can't believe I didn't mention that one. I'm ashamed of myself.
You should be.
I am. I'm not a good member of the LGBTQI community. Just going to finish off now about, say something about this book, which was just such a great read.
Is that the #1 bestseller?
That is the #1 bestseller.
Oh, that's the one, yeah, thank you.
And we're going to make sure it stays at #1. There's so many good comments coming in. Can't wait to get the book.
It's available on hardback, ebook, and audio. And I narrate the audio as well.
Yeah. How long did it take to write this book?
Well, it started as a result. I was asked pretty much soon after those videos went out by about 3 publishers, but we went with Hodder and Stoughton because I felt that they had my voice. And I felt that the people involved in the publishers, they all knew somebody very close to them who had this illness. So it was going to be in safe hands. So pretty much it was September. So what's that, like 9 months?
Wow.
Yeah, about 9 months. I mean, one of the hardest parts was remembering some of the stuff, because I realized that I'd really lodged it in kind of, you know, lots of places, and it was hard to revisit. But it didn't trigger me. I was worried that it might trigger me. It didn't. And once the floodgates opened, there was something in me that told me this was an important book for people. And I think that's what spurred me on.
Yeah, one of the sections that really touched me was just at the end, where a member of your family and close friends all wrote a letter. I mean, that was an amazing...
Yeah, I was really pleased that I had that idea to do that, actually. Because I'd already given so many words, we didn't know if there were, and I said, oh, I'd rather lose some words and have this section, because a very underrepresented group is the people who live with and love those with depression. And they're very underrepresented, and they're not talked about enough. And it's very, very, very hard to live with someone with depression. And I have been incredibly lucky with my family, incredibly lucky with Tim, my kid's dad, and incredibly lucky with my hero, Lincoln Townley, who didn't know anything about this illness when he met me. And he said he might have been one of those people who went, well, what's she got to be depressed about? She's, you know, what's she going on about? but now he understands it and he's wonderful with me. And I feel very blessed because there's so many people who don't have that support. So it was important for me. So it's my dad, my husband, my 2 boys, and my sister, and 4 of my closest friends who've all been with me pretty much for the whole duration of my of my poorly life, really. Yeah, my wonderful life, but my sometimes poorly life.
Yeah, no, it was great to read those. It really made you think quite a lot. I'm going to end now. I want to say thank you for being such a great ally to the LGBTQI community.
Thank you.
Thank you for being such a great spokesperson and an advocate for people with mental health.
Oh, thank you, Linda. And I can't wait to see you and give you a big hug, because it's been too long.
It definitely has. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Lots of love.
Good luck with the #1 best-selling book.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for talking about the #1 best-selling book on Amazon. Bye. Love you.